Ben Ponton, the ACT's Chief Planner, is with me for the latest in our Canberra 2030 series of region conversations about how we shape the city. Ben, a particularly timely conversation given that the government has just released the draft territory plan, long awaited, and the district strategies that will literally shape how the city does look in a decade's time. Let's begin with your starting point for this really important piece of work.
So the starting point for this work was to shift the way that proponents particularly, but all of us, think about development in the ACT. So at the moment the system that we have is very rules-based, it's very numeric, and it doesn't encourage people to stop and really think about what is it that we're trying to achieve with these developments. So we're shifting that to be a more outcomes, people-focused planning system, and we're achieving that through, first of all, the new planning bill, which again sets up the structure or the framework, if you will, and then moving into the district strategies and the territory plan to set up a structure that allows people to stop and think about, okay, I've got a site here, I want to achieve certain things from that site, but how can I be a respectful neighbour? How can I contribute to the well-being of Canberrans, as opposed to simply what building am I going to build on this site? So that's really the main premise in terms of the starting point, and then everything else has flowed from that.
Just explain the district strategies and the role that they play, because we've got now sort of a whole articulated space that goes from single building all the way up to how the city looks, and the district strategies is quite a new part of that.
Yes, so as part of our review process, we looked at the system as a whole, and we explored what was happening in other parts of Australia and also other parts of the world. And we've got a very good planning strategy, which is the metropolitan context in terms of that high level policy of what the government is trying to achieve through planning. And then we go straight to en-bloc provisions in the territory plan. And what we were missing was that middle piece of strategic planning that looked at that district scale. So what we've introduced is district scale planning that's resulting in the district strategies. And importantly, what that does, it allows us to explore with the Canberra community what is important about their particular location and what can we do through the territory plan to protect and enhance those really important features that are unique to particular districts. Interestingly, through the engagement exercise that we conducted in developing this work, we asked people about what was important to them in their district. We actually found a lot of commonality across Canberra, which I thought was really interesting, that there are things that people thought were important to them locally or at a district scale that in fact are important to the ACT as a whole, and then we're able to drill down a little bit more in terms of exploring what's important at that district scale and making sure that that is then reflected in the territory plan.
Okay, so if I can characterise this for the lay listener, what's essentially happened is that we've moved away from a planning system which said, for example, number of windows allowable, that's what you mean by numeric scale, that people could tick boxes and say, look, I've fulfilled all those standards and so therefore I get planning approval. We've moved away to that to something that is more nuanced, that's more based on design principles, that then fits within the category of how districts will look, how whole areas will have an identity of their own that then fits into the way that the ACT develops. That's pretty much the gist of it?
Exactly right. So at the moment, if I have a block of land and I'm thinking about redeveloping that, what I would do is think about what's the height of the building going to be, what are the setbacks, as you said, how many windows, where are the windows placed, what's the numeric standard of open space. But what we're wanting to do is shift that so that a proponent will stop and think, okay, I've got this block that is in a street. What's happening in that street? How does that street relate to the broader precinct in the district? And how can we contribute and be, as I said earlier, a really good neighbour in that context? And
no change to the emphasis on density that the government's had for a while. I mean, there's some shifts around what's allowable in RZ1 and RZ2, so density does remain a priority?
Look, it does. So the government has a very clear policy position of accommodating our growth within the existing urban footprint, 70% of our growth within the existing urban footprint. That is a really important consideration, and we've taken that through in this work, and there's a whole range of reasons for that, but essentially it is just much more sustainable to better utilise our existing land, our existing serviced land, our infrastructure, rather than moving out and spreading beyond the existing urban footprint.
But what does this idea of ensuring quality actually mean? I mean, certainly the idea that you'll prioritise a more thoughtful approach to the design has got the thumbs up from lots of architects, lots of designers, people who've been really concerned about the quality of some of the buildings that have got through the approvals process. But you haven't necessarily got decision-making and assessment criteria embedded in this plan. So how are you going to ensure the quality?
So there's a number of tools that we're proposing, and as part of the suite of material that we're currently engaging with the Canberra community on, a really important concept is a document or suite of documents called design guides. So design guides are referenced in the territory plan, but they sit alongside, and there's a requirement that the proposals are consistent with these design guides. So there'll be a housing design guide and an urban design guide, which is about the public spaces that sit around a building. And they'll have really clearly articulated outcomes, expectations, and importantly photographs and diagrams to help people understand what we mean by the words that we've written. So often when you write things down, people still can struggle with, well, what does that mean in reality? So we want to actually show them visually, this is what we mean by a good outcome. This is what we mean by being a respectful neighbour in terms of buildings. This is how you can make sure that spaces that are left behind when you build a building are well utilised by the community, because the last thing we want to see is empty spaces. As I said, this whole system that we're trying to create here is about people, making sure that Canberrans enjoy the spaces and the buildings that we're building for the future.
One of the criticisms of the old system was certainly that it could take a very long time for approvals to go through, and I appreciate what you're saying about a more nuanced approach to design. Is this going to speed anything up? Have you got the resources that you're going to need to be able to implement this really quite significant step change in the process?
A really important part of the program that we've established is implementation. So there was the review phase, we're in the reform phase, and then we need to implement what we're proposing. So we are thinking about how we can educate not only the community and the industry on how best to utilise the new system and get the best out of it, but also our own people in the planning and land authority. So there'll be really detailed training for our people to make sure that we are applying those new provisions in a way that achieves the best possible outcome. So we're absolutely committed to that. In terms of timeframes, there's a number of things that can impact on timeframes, but what we're hoping is that we have a system that is easier to use and the outcomes that we're trying to achieve are clearly articulated. That should allow a more rapid process in assessment.
Yeah, now this is very new. We began this was launched at the beginning of November. There's been some criticism about the heed that was paid to community input. So I'm keen to understand how you responded to community input. I know you've said in the past that you've learned to bring the community with you rather than opposing them. Would you consider, for example, a community representative on the National Capital Design Review panel?
Look, that is certainly something that is open. In terms of membership of the National Capital Design Review panel, there's a range of expertise that we bring to that. There is nothing preventing us from considering that, and if that was put forward, certainly we'll consider that as part of the process.
Okay, that's interesting, because it goes straight to the question of trust in the planning process, and I've certainly heard you say when we've spoken in the past that trust has been broken in the planning process in the ACT. How do you feel that the draft plan will restore that? How are you going about making the community believe in this again?
So the first part of this was developing the framework or the bill, the legislation, and we really spent a lot of time thinking about and reflecting on what we had heard from the Canberra community and the industry. So we have looked to strengthen transparency in the assessment process, and I won't go into the detail of that, but there's quite a lot of strengthening in transparency, so that it's not a case of a DA is lodged and then behind closed doors the assessment takes place. We're inbuilt into that much more engagement and feedback to the community. We've also articulated what we mean by good planning. I think that's really important too. So that's up front, and that will then flow through all of the subsequent documents, so the district strategies and the territory plan. And importantly, we've incorporated into the bill good consultation principles. So again, we're being really upfront with the community about what it is that we will commit to in terms of engaging with the community.
Is there a greater role for the Assembly given the significance of this kind of shift, or is that perhaps something that you view with some horror?
I think it's really important that we protect the system that we have, and we have that system for a reason, because the ACT was an early adopter reflecting on what was happening around the world in terms of development assessment and politics. And we do have an independent planning authority for a reason, and that is so that we don't have decisions made on planning in terms of the outcomes and developments that are politically motivated. And not saying that that would happen, but there's a risk if you have the Assembly dealing with development applications. And also I would suggest that perhaps the better role for our politicians and the Assembly is to make sure that we've got the settings right. And that's really important and a critical part or a critical role for the Assembly to play. So getting the framework right in terms of the legislation, getting the territory plan right in terms of the provisions, and then we leave it to the planning experts to make the assessments against those provisions with input from other entities, including the Design Review Panel. And as I said earlier, happy to consider whether that would include a community representative. We do that on other councils. Heritage Council and other councils have that community input. It would be making sure that we had the right fit in terms of that representative. But look, I think there's a way to go in terms of getting this to the end, and we're at that really important phase now where the community and the industry can absolutely shape the outcomes that we're trying to achieve here.
Ben, we're in the middle of a huge housing crisis in the ACT, so the discussion about design and how we manage that and the identity of the city is all very well. But as things currently stand in this city, we are today one of the most expensive, if not the most expensive places to rent a house in the whole of Australia. The affordability issue is a really critical one for young couples trying to get into the housing market, perhaps people on lower incomes. Is there space in the plan for addressing those urgent needs?
Absolutely. So the legislation that is before the Assembly now does reference affordability because planning looks at a whole range of things. We look at affordability of housing, we look at environmental issues, we look at transport issues, a range of things. So that is reflected now in the bill, which is a really good first step in terms of having that focus. So that's in the framework. Then in the district strategies that we have out for consultation at the moment, there is a reference to housing affordability and some possibilities in terms of what we could do to further expand on the government's initiatives in that space. And of course, let's not lose sight of the fact that the government is doing a lot in this space already, but we are looking at the district strategies to start to flesh out some more things that we could do. And then that will flow through into the territory plan itself. So absolutely there are some opportunities here. And through this exercise, we've also asked a number of questions of the Canberra community about things we would like to explore further with them. One of those is looking at the opportunity for dual occupancies and unit titling of those. So that's something that we've asked some questions about in the current workshops that we're conducting. So I think absolutely there's an opportunity there. We're also looking at other areas for further investigation in the district strategies where we could look at increasing density and make sure that that is done in the right way, in the right locations that will impact on affordability in a positive way. We don't want to just sort of have open slather. We need to make sure that this is nuanced and that we actually achieve the outcome that we're looking for.
So let's fast forward 10 years. Let's look Canberra 2030 and beyond. What does the city look like as it's been reshaped by the new territory plan? What changes will be visible and what will that do for the quality of life in the city?
I want people, when they walk through the city and walk through their suburbs, that they will be experiencing a place and not just looking at buildings. That's the simplest way that I can summarise this. If we get people thinking about what is the outcome that we're looking for, what is the contribution that I can make to the street and the precinct, as we see more and more of that happening, we'll start getting places and not just individual buildings. So that's really the key thing that I think that we can get out of this whole exercise. Okay,
well let's see where we land. We might have to reconvene in 8-10 years' time and see if that's taken effect. Ben Ponton, great to have you with me. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
I'm Genevieve Jacobs and this is Region Media.